Thank you for watching this Last Mile Profits video.
Vinted moving out across the pond. Take a look at the latest Last Mile Profits video to find out more.
Last Mile Profits is brought to you by Parcel Pending by Quadient.
Gary, Vinted are going places. Would you like to share exactly where they're going?
Absolutely. I can speak publicly about this, I guess, now because it's been announced, but Vinted are casting their eyes across the Atlantic and have launched their exchange operation initially in New York. I met with Vinted out in New York before the new year. And also, while we were waiting to meet them, we were sat in a bar and there was a Vinted TV ad came up on the screen in the bar. So they mean business on the other side of the Atlantic.
For those of you who don't know, Vinted actually originated in Lithuania, and in Central Eastern Europe, America is a really big thing. So, in that respect, it's probably pretty cool for all the guys and girls in my part of the world. But actually, I think there's even more than that, because Vinted have made an absolutely incredible job in Europe. They've gone from being almost nowhere to becoming a household name. And I think, Gary, in some markets, they're, if not yet at Amazon volumes, they're coming pretty close, in Europe at least.
I believe the total number of parcels for Vinted in Europe is around the billion mark. So if you consider the entirety of e-commerce home delivery in France is 2.4, and then the UK is the biggest European market, is about 5 billion. A billion parcels is, whatever way you measure it, it's a lot of parcels.
So Vitautas and team, you can be very proud, but let's talk a little bit about what's going to be happening across the pond. So, it is a huge market, huge opportunity. I actually took a look when I was doing an article, and just a few companies, and they're a little bit different in profile. There's something called ThreadUp. Of course, there's eBay, but that's not really directly competitive.
There's the Real. So there are kind of fashion resale businesses there, but they tend to be sort of the higher ticket items. So, you've got a designer dress, you've worn it to the cocktail party, social death to be seen in it a second time. You sell your $500 dress for $300. And the interesting point then, we've covered this before and we've made a few comments about it. You don't mind paying $15-20 for shipping for a $300 item. But shipping in the US for a $10 t-shirt, when the average home delivery cost is $4, $5, $6, it's not going to work. So I think Vitautas and team have got some big challenges in building mass adoption for their model in the US.
Yeah, I think because there's two sides to it. So there's, of course, let's say the Vinted re-commerce team, and then there's the Vinted Go team, which is Vitautas and the guys and girls there. And I think you're right. One of the challenges is going to be that whereas out of home has really, really taken off in Europe, and there are alternatives. And we know that out of home is the only way to get the capacity, the first time delivery success, the low cost point. It's not so big in the US, and certainly lockers are nascent compared to Europe. This is going to be a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a number of ways of looking at it. So, I think Vinted very publicly spoken about, feeling that shipping across Europe should be €1. I don't think it's physically possible to move a product across the US for €1. We've talked about UPS, the cost of their drivers, $175,000 a year basic wage for a UPS driver. Even if they're doing 200 parcels a day, 300 parcels a day, you do the math, they're not even doing final mile for $1. So they've really got to find a way to ship this product much more cheaply. And I think there's a couple of ways of doing that. I think Vinted are superb, or Vinted Go in particular, are superb at driving down shipping costs and creating innovative solutions based around out of home, based around consolidation is one way. But the other way is, can they really build the mass number of users? So perhaps you can do all your trading within New York. So you're selling from one part of New York to another part of New York. I'm not talking about this mythical thing where I drop my parcel on the corner of my street and later on somebody comes to the same locker and picks it up. That's still going to be a unicorn type transaction. But if you're constantly shipping stuff from New York to California or from Seattle to Florida, the costs are going to be too high. So I think there's two elements here: driving an out of home adoption to drive down that cost. So you're not trying to deliver to 300 million delivery points in North America, and trying to get some kind of local to local or intra-regional sales engine going. And for that, you need volume, you need mass adoption.
And I'm also looking at one other thing, because, this is really entering the, Amazon's home turf. And some of the most innovative stuff in terms of last mile is actually done not by the legacy carriers, UPS, FedEx, USPS, it's actually Amazon. Can you see in any scenario in which actually Amazon would open up to Vinted, which in a way is taking a bit of their cake?
I hadn't thought about this question, but yeah, that's a very interesting question. Well, if you see USPS announcing that they're going to be basically shedding Amazon volume, in their words, they're going to stop subsidizing Amazon's delivery in the US and try to get back to a profitable business by not having that kind of massive downward pressure on pricing. There's two things. That could create capacity within USPS for them to do very, very sweet deal for Vinted. And at the moment, in their kind of post-pilot, early adoption phase, whatever you want to call it, they are using USPS to do their deliveries while other alternatives, I assume, are being worked on and created. The other thing is, does that mean that Amazon are going to have to build their own logistics, even more logistics capability? They're going to have to backfill what USPS were doing with them. Does that mean they're going to become, a private postal operator that could offer very, very cheap delivery to third parties?
To all intents and purposes, I think that's where it's going. The question is whether they would be prepared to open up to a player that is directly competitive with probably the fastest growing part of e-commerce business, because re-commerce, I think most people would say is the fastest growing. But I can see some benefits though. So I think there are going to be some people that are quite happy because we know that Vinted Go and Vitaltus absolutely love out of home and particularly parcel lockers. So our good friends at Quadient, our friends at Luxor One are probably going to be pretty happy. I would imagine that Blockit's going to have its sort of space somewhere in this whole constellation. So, Gary, I think this is going to be one to observe. Based on our contacts, because both you and I have had a lot of contacts with Vinted, if they do something, they tend to do it pretty well. So we'll be watching with interest. But maybe if any of our viewers from the US see a Vinted, perhaps locker, or order Vinted items, share with us how it's working, please. And we love your comments, Vitaltus. So please, share some thoughts, what you can share.
Well, I'm hoping he might post their American ad in the chat so people can see how they're marketing this in the US, because I think they've had a go before and it hasn't scaled in the way they wanted to. So they've tweaked their messaging. They're really, really focused on the mindset of the American consumer. So maybe we can see one of the ads posted down below and people can judge for themselves whether they've got the tone right, whether they really are going to scale in the way they have done in Europe. I'd be really intrigued to get opinions on that.
There you go. Vitaltus, please show us your ad. Gary, as usual, great talking. Let's observe this with interest. And, looking forward to lots of comments and perhaps pictures from our viewers.
Gary, I was looking at the subscriptions and realized that a huge number of our audience actually don't subscribe to watch our videos.
Really? That's outrageous. It's a bit like watching the BBC without your TV license. How can we keep it free if people aren't subscribing and letting us know they want more of this content? It's ridiculous.
And on top of that, if they're not subscribed, they don't get information about the latest hot episode where you can make one of your witty jokes and we can talk about something that is really important for our industry.
If I knew that a single act like that would make sure I got maximum time taking the mickey out of you, I'd be hitting subscribe in a heartbeat.
Well, look, so here we have it. Please, everyone, if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your opportunity. Click right now. The button should be there, or maybe there. Do it now and have it done.